We're recording. Okay. So welcome everyone to another Celo governance call. I'm Yaz. I'm going to be facilitating Celo governance call number 7. In this call, we're going to have several proposals that we want to go over for the governance. Yeah, so let's get started. Here's our agenda, and we'll kick it off. So we're going to start off with the first proposal, CGP 28, initialize uptime look back window. Joshua, you want to kick it off?
Sure. So with the deployment of, I'm not sure which previous CGP it was or CIP it was. I guess it was CIP. There's 28. Yeah, so this makes the validator's uptime look back window governable. And so basically what this CGP is doing is just kind of setting a default value for that contract. And the default value was 12, which is the current value. So then the purpose of this is to just kind of set the default to avoid some, I think, potentially minor issues. Interesting. Yeah, so it's inside the code. It just gives an error. It would again falls back again to 12. So this is just like setting the baseline, and then after donut, the community can propose a new value for the uptime.
All right, and to be clear, like, yeah, like if we just can reiterate, I think this one is like CGP 28 is the highest priority that we want to ideally get before donut on May 19th. And we're potentially going to submit it on chain before the donut hard fork activates, just because we want to avoid the, like any of the log errors that come up. They're not going to affect the network, but it would be nice to not have that error pop up, especially on the validator side. Does anyone have any question about this? Our intention is, to open up this call for anyone who had any questions and stuff specifically about this proposal. All right. So Joshua, do you know when you're all going to be submitting CGP 28 on mainnet?
I am not familiar with that, unfortunately.
York, do you know?
Sorry, I just joined.
Okay.
What's the question?
Yeah, so we're going over CGP 28, right? So that's the one about setting the look back, the uptime look back window, right before donut hard fork activates. And the reason we want to do that is because we want to avoid the uptime look back window.
Right.
Even though that was not going to impact the network in any way, it's just like an annoying error to see if you're a validator and you want to avoid all the extra logs that you generate.
Yep. Is Or on the call?
Yeah, I pinged them, but I'm not sure if he's on a call. But yeah, ideally, like, or if the author of the proposal, the ideal date to set it is like we want to activate it right before donut hard fork activates on May 19th. So sometime in early May is my presumption, and I'm just opening it up for the community if anyone has any questions about this.
Yeah, I think like any of the Tuesdays between the actual hard fork activation and this week would make sense to me. The only question I think is whether or not we care a lot about phasing it across the test network separately to see the impact, but I think it's a fairly innocuous change.
Or responding back to me. I'm just waiting for him to see if he can come make it. Okay, yeah, he's joining right now. But yeah, while he joins, I want to ask anyone in the community, especially if you're a validator, not necessarily if you're a validator, but this impact validators as well. If you have any concern about this proposal, anything you want to talk about, at least in regard to the CGP 28. Okay, Or is joining. Hey, Or, how's it going?
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it. Yeah, so we just briefly went over CGP 28, and we're talking about like when do we anticipate the ideal timeline to submit this proposal, given it's the highest priority, because oh, I see. Thanks, Bjork. I guess there might have been some issue with the calendar side. I'll double check on that. My bad. But yeah, I'm kind of curious about when is the anticipated timeline, do you think, for submission?
I don't know, anytime. So long as it's executed before donut, then the actual time doesn't make a difference. So it can definitely be batched if there's anything else coming.
Okay, cool. All right, so I guess then, to wrap up CGP 28, given there's no concern or questions from the community, we expect to be submitting it to mainnet, right? Like sometimes in early May, like in either next week or the week following, but definitely before the hard fork activates in the event, just to avoid this log error. So with that, I suggest we move on to the next item agenda, CGP 29. The validator set size increase. Joshua, you want to kick it off?
Yep, pretty much. So it says what it's doing on the tin. We propose increasing the maximum number of validators from 100 to 110. So a kind of technical note is that we will retain the current minimum of 22 validators. Just keep the continuity, don't feel any particular need to change that. From a technical point of view, currently adding additional validators does cost kind of additional time in consensus. From our benchmarks, we expect the time to complete consensus to currently increase about 10 milliseconds per extra validator. However, so that'd be about 100 extra milliseconds. However, with kind of the rollouts of 1.2.5 and 1.3 with our current block gas limit, we expect we'll easily have enough time to absorb that 100 milliseconds extra, and that time actually will be reduced in the future depending on kind of amount of engineering work that we could put into that. So that's kind of technical side. And then from the social side, we think there's a lot of benefits from having at least some small number more validators. And it seemed like people were generally receptive to that. There is an aspect of this about increasing validator payouts or making sure that that is set correctly, and I actually don't have a little less context on that. Kind of my overview of this.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, given this is a proposal to increase the validator set size, did anyone have any feedback on the call on this?
Does it have to do anything with the telecom involvement? Or is it clear how many validators these guys are running yet?
So I can speak a little bit about this. It has nothing to do with telecom per se, like the Deutsche Telekom per se joining the ecosystem, but it has more to do with we do, like for a long time, the C Labs wanted to expand the validator set size just to, allow for more people to become validators and stuff like that. And if you look at other proof of stake networks, a lot of them have been expanding their set size to be more inclusive, to more people to be able to participate in consensus.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's just
nice.
two quick questions. I guess the validator rewards per validator would remain the same. So what is it, 75,000 CUSD per validator? So the total rewards paid out would increase for the network.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess basically by adding 10 more, it would just mean more people are eligible through the voting for validators. So in the hierarchy of validators, when you look through those who currently are and those who are not yet qualified, it'll just push down a bit and include the next 10 kind of thing.
Yep. And then part of telegraphing this change is letting additional validators or kind of new validators know that at a specific point, the set will increase so they can spin up a validator prior to and have it essentially elected in the bottom 10 prior to this change going through. And then once the change would go through, then their validator would be kind of elected by virtue of the larger set size.
So I know like it's pretty hard generally for somebody to become a validator if you're kind of not in it. But there is a mechanism that you can get in via foundation votes, I think, is probably the most realistic for, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, for getting in if you're totally new to it. So if there's 10 more validators being added, this is a bit of a random question, but is there any thinking around, whether it would make sense to encourage, new validators or via the foundation's voting or something? Sorry, that's a bit abstract of a point, but.
It's a good question. There's definitely an interest in increasing even the diversity of having new validators, like especially if they're independent, not whale and stuff like that. There's definitely an interest. So this is just like as an initial proposal to scope out just the set size increase, and at least from a technical point of view, its impact on the network. There's been analysis done on that, right, Joshua?
Yep.
Right. And it's like feasible to do from a technical point of view. Definitely, if we do the increase, we do want to encourage, at least from the CLAB point of view, more independent entities to join the ecosystem as validators, rather than just let it be eaten up by the whales and stuff. But yeah.
Hey, I have one question about increasing the set. How long will it be between when the change happens versus when the election happens? So it will be when governance is executed, next epoch change will be 110 validators immediately?
Yep. So at that point, up to 110 validators could be elected. So we expect kind of by telegraphing this change that there'll be those 10 validators that already have their votes and are kind of standing by. If there weren't, you could have a situation like Baklava where there are empty seats, and then kind of essentially once you get the votes, would be pulled in on the next epoch.
Yeah, more than empty seats, I would be worried about some of the old validators that people have left in their groups where they have even stopped their machines. And they might, if they have, there are a bunch of people who had 2 validators, for example, and they dropped to 1. And if they never deaffiliated their thing, they might actually become electable. And then they will just get slashed for no reason, because they will basically get like a 24-hour downtime, because they will be elected, but they won't actually have the validator running. So it's something I think it would be useful if between this execution and the epoch change, we have some time, right? So somehow the governance proposal is planned so that it doesn't, happen like 15 minutes before the epoch change or something, and it gets executed, suddenly there is an epoch change, and then people get sort of a messed up setup.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Probably want to go through and see who the current next kind of 10 validators to be elected would be, and then talk to them about this change and whether they want to keep their validator up or if it's up.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a really good point. yeah, we can definitely reach out to anyone who, not de-affiliated to make sure that, they have the heads up that in case this happened, they're able to keep it in mind, in case they want to be participating in consensus again. Do we have a timeline on this, Joshua?
I'm not fully sure. It would probably be post donut. And then it could potentially be aligned with foundation voting.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I think for the purpose of this call, there's only like I think just bringing up the proposal for the network for the community, and signaling that that's the intention, that there's a desire to increase the validator set size, at least from the CLAB perspective. Does anyone have any other feedback on this proposal? No one? Everyone's cool with the validator set size increase?
Quick question, just like, has there been much research and like to what degree of how much this would actually increase spending? And like, I think there was some discussion in the forum about it, but I didn't follow up. But I know that we're already kind of overspending, and I think this would probably put us on track to overspend a little bit even more. So yeah, just curious what any thoughts are there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm less familiar with the reserve spending, and I think I have to go kind of sync with them and figure out how much we want to retarget with this change.
I have a question. Is there a place folks can, async continue the discussion about the increasing validator set size?
Yes, there's a forum post, which I actually have a PR to include it in that CIP, and so I'll go bug you about that.
Update CIP 29. Let me just merge it right now so people are able to include the validator set size. Okay. Okay, there's a forum post right here. Okay, so I'm gonna approve it. Submit review. Squash remove. New branch. And now if we go back to it. Okay. Yeah, so for everyone, if you go to the forum post, it's already on link to the CVP, but this is where, I would encourage everyone to continue the discussion about this. And Zviad, if you had, was it Zviad? Or no, Trevor, I believe, you brought up the thing about the Celo reserve. Yeah, I encourage all of you to capture it all in the forum post and stuff. Cool. Are we good on this proposal, or does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Alrighty. I guess it's okay then to move on to the next item. Let me go back to the issue. Ticket, Celo governance, and yeah, CVP 30. Well, technically we don't have a CVP for it, but we have a forum post, and I believe it was written by Albert, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'll chime in on this one. So the intent here is just to kick off discussion on something that's more in a pre-draft phase. We wanted some input, both Trevor, who's on the call, and myself, about something that we're working on in terms of like conceptualization and design that may evolve into a CGP. Primarily sort of our takeaways for this discussion today are to get kind of a feeler or a gauge on the read of people that are involved in governance, and your guys' take on how feasible this might be, or what the governance response to some kind of a possibly governance gated minting of stable coins is. And I think Zviad had chimed in a little on this, and as well. I think Peter, if he's on the call.
Yeah.
To sort of contextualize this a little bit, we believe that building some sort of a process to mint these large amounts of collateralized stablecoins after their initial launch will empower us to scale to levels that weren't quite feasible before with just minting through Mento. And these on-chain mints of large, low slippage amounts could enable our stablecoin supply to expand at a much greater pace, which feeds into some of these concerns about getting exchange liquidity, for example. I think a few people mentioned, why don't we just pursue on-exchange liquidity? This is sometimes a precursor to exchanges even getting enough interest in our stablecoins.
Can you elaborate on the current issues? Is it just slippage or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, it is a little bit slippage, but it's also some of the limitations of people that have been in discussions about these types of mints. Let's say categorically in the $1 million to $10 million range. Not all of these potential actors would necessarily have the capability or the desire to do a long time frame buy, such as like a limit order, or to implement, let's say, like a bot to purchase on Mento over time. These are, let's say, perhaps sometimes like state actors, large funds, or it's out in public. There's certain large partnerships, sometimes like Deutsche Telekom like partnerships, that may have a need for very large blocks of stable coins that they can telegraph or even predict in fair distance ahead of time.
I think my question was sort of, and you sort of replied that it was this scenario where they already own a bunch of Celo and they want to convert this into cusd, right? And allowing them to do that in large quantities, that seems problematic, right? So for example, Celo is a volatile asset, right? So if I spend 2 months acquiring Celo in earlier times, and then I come in and I have an opportunity to convert this large amount into dollars without slippage, that seems completely unfair to the other traders, right? That's not market price at all. And that seems bad for Celo shareholders because, well, the price of Celo token is volatile, right? And that's why you can't convert large amounts back and forth. I think that's sort of the part that I'm confused in a way that, for example, if we allow people to sell large amounts of Celo to reserve, where basically reserve is going to lose money. At least that's sort of my view, my understanding of it, because it will be, if you have a slow accumulation period and you can just sell in large batches, that, I would do that too. I'll just take out a bunch of Celo and then sell it in a batch, right? That doesn't, that's the part that doesn't quite make sense to me. I think the other part makes sense. If someone comes in with like $10 million, they have it in dollars, right? And they say, I want to get 10 million cusd, that should be a smooth process. But I feel like if they come in with a bunch of Celo and they want to convert it into cusd, that makes less sense to me.
Yeah, I think today actually the primary, or one of the only ways to get fiat into the Celo ecosystem is to buy Celo primarily. We just don't quite have the same fiat to stablecoin on ramps, and to get to that stage, we need to enable much greater pools of liquidity of Cero cusd, right? If we're thinking in terms of just this scale, it's kind of impossible, let's say specifically for Ceros, to convert any type of either Celo or fiat to $1 million of Cero at this time, right? So that really gates our growth potential for Cero.
But I think my point here was that if, we have people who want to convert dollars to cusd, I guess you're right. There is a chicken and an egg problem in a way that if they do start making these trades on the exchanges, the infrastructure will improve to allow them to make this type of trades, right? I do, and that sort of was my point, that if we had this in on a larger exchange, then this would already work. It will sort of already work. Like $1 million one, I think it will work on BitterX too, but not in one go, right? I feel like making a singular $1 million thing, it doesn't even work for DAI. I think if you wanted to like buy $1 million worth of DAI, you're gonna have to pay pretty significant slippage. It's not, and that one is like, we're talking about 100 times larger thing than the Celo one right now. So, but you can acquire $1 million worth of DAI slowly at a pretty small slippage, but you will still have to wait. And that's the part that I feel like if the process will be that these large actors, they can just accumulate Celo at some point and then make these huge cells of Celo without getting the without making a market type of sell of Celo to get it into $1, that just seems bad for the reserve and the Celo holders, because they will essentially get to accumulate and then sell without the price dropping, which is not something you should be able to do.
I mean, I think I kind of want to separate like Celo price and stability or liquidity, right? I think it's important to sort of divorce these conceptually, and I think it's primarily Mento's role in the greater ecosystem to provide a mechanism for users to onboard into these stable coins, and also to provide stability, right? So I think if you look at Mento from that perspective of enabling conversions to these stable coins and to provide that collateralized stable basis, like that's foundationally what we're focused on, especially the ability to convert to these stable coins.
Doesn't there have to be convertibility, because that underpins the pegging system?
Correct.
If you removed the convertibility, then there is no peg really.
Right.
Yeah, I guess my point is that it makes sense that when that happens in a short term, it becomes much different if we were talking about processes that take significantly longer to acquire, and then and then converting it, because the Celo asset itself is volatile, right? So the only way that works is if those conversions are happening quickly, as in you're not holding the asset itself and then converting it at a later on, because you might get back more, you might get back less. You don't really know what amount you will get back. And it's the Celo has shown to be pretty volatile, right? You can get very very big price jumps. So that's the part where I would be at least worried that unless I can understand this better, where just as I understand, this mechanism would somehow allow certain entities to essentially sell large amounts of Celo with not all with the market price, right? Just sell it from the reserve. They will essentially be able to sell large amounts of Celo to the reserve.
Yes, but specifically for stable coins. I mean, this is primarily a conversion mechanism into the stablecoin ecosystem. Whereas, let's say, versus some other conversion mechanisms where the primary conversion mechanism is to sell out of Celo into, let's say, some other asset that's outside the Celo ecosystem.
Sure, but I mean, it's still a stable coin that can be converted back slowly, but it can be converted back to the dollars too, right? I guess that's the part where I would be confused into how this would work, right? Would there be something where they when they accumulate this Celo, you would know the total amount of dollars they have spent, and then you would allow them to sell into that amount? But even with that, it just seems it seems weird for the reserve to be selling sort of CUSD at not at a market price, essentially, right?
Yeah,
To be buying Celo at not a market price.
I tend to agree with Ziad's perspective on this, and I haven't looked at this proposal, so sorry if I'm ignorant about what's actually intended here. But my first thought was just that it sounds like what we might want here is a broker instead of a kind of a supplement or a substitute to the existing Mento mechanism. It's like if we need some entity to gradually accumulate large amounts of stablecoin in order to arrange large transfers, large exchanges, that makes more sense to me than yeah, replacing the core mechanism to not just be market based. Again, I don't know the details here, so sorry if there's something obvious I'm missing.
Yeah,
Like-
I mean, I would argue that it is market-based. Like the proposal is to use the price oracle price. It's maybe the point of differentiation here is like it's not the market slippage. That's the big deal here, right?
But that is the market price is with the slippage, right? With the depth too. Without that, that's not the singular price is, especially for such a volatile asset, is not that relevant, right? Because especially when you're talking about such large amounts, then that's really, I think what I'm coming from is that I think it puts Celo shareholders at a negative because the reserve will come out negative from this type of transaction, and by proxy the Celo holders would also come out as a total negative from this type of transaction. And I think, you know, in an ideal scenario, the way I would prefer to see this is that if there are entities who need to convert large amount of dollars, right? They're starting with the dollars. They're not original investors or something like that who are starting with Celo. They are starting with dollars and they want to get cusd.
Mhm.
If this is a thing, I would rather see Celo or Foundation or C-Labs, whoever is in touch with these entities, connect them with other entities who could provide this conversion for them, right? You know, you come in and you say that, hey, you know, want to convert this $1 million of USD into CUSD and to just get the offers out. Because I do think it's possible to convert large amounts of USD to CUSD right now. It doesn't, you know, I understand that those entities don't want to do that work, but you do have to pay some fee when you're not doing the work, but it can be done with reasonably minimal fees too. And if such a demand exists, I would rather see a sort of a market solution to this, right? Which will actually be even better because that means now we have real businesses running on Celo network.
But can I just add, I think it's not a market approach what Mento is doing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason there's slippage on Mento is because it's basically interacting with a subset of the overall reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's intentional as a safety feature because it prevents things that are beyond above my head, but to do with, you know, price manipulation. So intentionally, Mento is only allowed to basically interact with a portion of the reserve, which reduces the liquidity and increases the slippage. So, I mean, another way of thinking of this is, you know, how should we control the portion of the reserve that's being interacted with on Mento? If we increase that portion, we would reduce slippage on Mento. But this is not a market mechanism. It's the governance mechanism for how Celo is being pegged. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I'm not really following how we would make this a market mechanism. It seems to me Mento has got its own slippage and the market has its own slippage.
That's true, but I mean, the Mento slippage is not significantly worse than the market one right now. And it can be increased to match them too, but there will still be some slippage anyways, right? Even on the market, because you can't just sell huge amounts of Celo and not expect that you will get the, you know, the current price, right? No one expects that to be able to do that.
So I guess the question is, like, what should the slippage be on Mento? Should it be better than the market? Should it be the same?
I certainly don't think that Mento is in any ways like for instance, like competing with the market. But this is simply, let's say, a way to even enable OTC desks. Like think of a hypothetical scenario where somebody wanted to buy $10 million of C euros. Like it's virtually impossible if they want to do it in the next week or two. If we really wanted to scale up our stablecoin ecosystem to the next order of magnitude.
I think it's true for C euro maybe, but that's probably not true for CUSD, right? If there is a qualified OTC desk, because you can convert 10 million USD to CUSD right now over a few days period. And it has to be done, programmatically for sure, but it's 100% possible. I'm very sure that this is possible. And again, the fee will be there. I think 1 to 2% fee will be there to do this conversion. And if we wanted to make that fee smaller, there are other things that probably have to be taken. But that's why I'm saying that this is, from a feasibility perspective, this is possible. If there is demand for this, I would rather see this solved by a business-to-business partnership in a way. It's someone providing a service to other people who have this this demand, because it's feasible in the today's setup. Not true for Euro probably, because the Euro one is certainly just Celo, and C Euro liquidity is also much smaller. But I do think this is feasible for CUSD.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I don't know if I'm like chiming in. Certainly not my domain, but like I do read this proposal as a like extraordinary minting mechanism for when basically liquidity and slippage are just like super impractical, specifically for Celo Euro, for us to want to find a solution where like an institution that wants a large amount of Celo Euro, let's say, is just practically unable to do so. And so I wouldn't view this proposal as a mechanism by which we will fill larger, or like will reduce slippage again for trading against Mento, but really just for like being a quote unquote minter of last resort for when there is just practically no solution.
Right. I mean,
which is why it goes through governance.
This should be seen as like an additional alternative out there, that it is, in addition to OTC desks, in addition to the possibility of, someone out there starting a private business to address these needs. Like I certainly don't see this being used more than a handful of times at most before like a better at scale solution is implemented.
If you look at it as a mechanism right now, it is using the governance as a mechanism, the governance process. So my question is, if you anticipate using the governance process to do large-scale minting a number of times, maybe not a lot, but like a handful of times, given those external partners, I do question whether it's the most efficient way to go about it and stuff. It seems that, as Ziad was saying, if it's ideal if there's a business-to-business solution first, and if that can't be done for some reason, maybe that's like where the governance mechanism can come in and help out. Ziad, with that, did I capture your thoughts right?
Yeah, I mean, I would first see sort of what have we attempted to first, stimulate the ecosystem itself to have this, because Celo Foundation, well, or C Labs or Celo Foundation, whoever these other entities talk to, are in more of a unique position that other people wouldn't be in, right? Because they won't randomly come to you to say, hey, I have $1 million, I want to convert it to million CUSD, right? So first, I would want to see few attempts to get this done more organically by actually having, the ecosystem grow around, having someone who is a provider of such a service. If it doesn't work, if you can't get anyone to do something like this, sure, maybe you move to the plan B to allow to do this through other means. But the other one just gets, way more benefits, right? Because you have a thing that works without the intervention of, the central bank of Celo, essentially, right? You get this thing done organically as part of the protocol. And the reason why I'm saying this is because specifically for this USD one is because I do think it is possible to do it today. And that's why I don't see the need for an extraordinary measures. And since I see the feasibility, but I don't see the demand, right? I would rather see the feasibility and demand match to actually get the product working as it's supposed to, instead of resorting to an alternative mechanism for this, right? Because I think that would be a better setup overall.
Yeah.
Just interested in like so
Go
yeah, I came in a little late to the discussion, but I mean, I think the challenge, so maybe for CUSD, like things work quite nicely now. Well, to some extent, I'll ask Al, but things kind of work okay for CUSD now because we have, you know, established a kind of baseline level of liquidity. There are a number of very active OTC desks with a sort of day turnaround. That kind of is working. For Celo Euro, you know, when we made this proposal, I think one of the things that folks brought up was we'd like to see a more structured way of providing initial liquidity in the future. And, you know, it is actually the case, I think, that like the Celo Foundation does not hold large amounts of Celo dollars. Right. And in general, that's going to be even more true for new stable coins that like are produced, especially if we're talking about like a sort of, you know, cranking the handle a little more and, you know, not taking 6 months to produce the next stable coin, but taking, say, 3 months or 6 weeks. And, you know, you scroll this forward. And I think it's very unlikely that, yeah, there's no mechanism in place other than the mechanism we said we wanted to get away from in the sort of Celo Euro creation and activation process to actually get to create this counterparty which has enough like liquidity to be able to make these kinds of trades, as far as I know. So
yeah, correct. I think like, for instance, the next couple of stable coins may progressively get smaller and smaller. And then as time goes on, it may be much harder in terms like relative market cap to mint these large amounts that kind of stepwise increase liquidity for these newer coins.
I need to jump in just in the interest of time. Like I just want to wrap it up, at least for this discussion topic, to give Tim an opportunity to share some another agenda item. Capture everything. Albert, would it be okay if everyone who has any feedback and stuff, they can continue discussing it on async on the forum post? Because given there's a lot of different thoughts on it, it might not be finalized, and maybe you know, the conversation can continue in the forum post in the interest of time.
Yeah, in the interest of time, maybe I'd like to move this to Discord as well, where we get a broader audience to chime in on this.
For sure. Share it on Discord. I think, yeah, I mean, like there's the forum channel and like the governance channel on there. So feel free to share it as well. Ronan, Joshua, if you don't mind, like, you know, raising hand, just capture it in the forum post. So for the final item on the agenda, I asked him if he's able to give a retro on the Coinbase Earn, what happened in the past few weeks and stuff. And thankfully, Tim is here to give an overview retro from the head of our beloved head of engineering, you know.
thanks, Yaz. Yeah, I hot off the heels of spending the morning at the dentist with my kids, no problems. But yeah, that was, so I'm somewhat I'm somewhat underprepared, but I am very happy to kind of and I think, like, you know, this is like a bigger conversation as well, and there's sort of many aspects to it. So you probably mostly read the various forum posts that have been out. You might have seen the Kuneko slides, the Kuneko talk that or like the part of Marek's talk that I did last week, talking a little bit about like blockchain performance and so on. I guess there's like a few interesting questions here that none of which we're going to have time to resolve today, but like a few that I think we're sort of carrying on. I guess there's like the first thing is like the sort of current status. As you probably all seen, like the network is like humming along with increased load. Coinbase have a kind of like a ratchet which they can use to sort of show the advanced task to more to various different people, and they've got various levers they can pull around marketing and so on. We're not in control of, like, C Labs is not in control of that. Coinbase is in control of that, and it's their kind of decision. Of course, they do control the sort of like floodgates for like a rather large inflow of traffic. We saw on the first day this was launched initially, we saw like more than 100x signups, and I think the challenge was that we had. So one of the things that we have started doing internally, and I think we're going to share soon with the community, is a kind of like retro from our point of view in terms of the various like pieces in the stack. I would love, like, obviously C Labs can only tell and was only like one actor in this piece, and I would love other folks to kind of add their contributions to that. And so, yeah, I'll be sharing that in the next couple of days. There's also, I think, so that's kind of like what happened, like how did we respond, what were the technical problems, like what things do we need to do we look at better in terms of communication and so on. One really interesting aspect of that, so I should say the current status is that like the load on the network may go up if Coinbase choose to change like the parameters. At the moment, like it's sort of a steady flow. But one aspect to this, I think, that we have kind of talked, we kind of didn't talk about enough, and I think merits a bigger governance conversation, which is why I want to bring it up here, is like around the use of like governance hotfixes and how we should think about that going forward. We kind of built this mechanism a long time ago. The validators on Baklava just before mainnet launch, so like just over a year ago, I guess, used and tested this mechanism, and we kind of intended it for things which, like, actually really for things which it was important to kind of minimize like the distribution list before like applying them. So it's a mechanism where validators can choose to like upvote the application of like a hash of a proposal change, but they don't necessarily get to see the proposal. They need to like trust an auditor. And so this kind of like the use of a hotfix here was kind of outside those parameters, but was something where we were quite concerned about network stability, because there was the upgrade to 1.2.5 and like the block gas limit change. I think we were kind of concerned about like network stability due to some issues in the handling of transaction pools, like large transaction pools, and also in terms of like the ability for regular transactions to get through on the network in the case of like a exponentially increasing like gas price. And obviously, like us nor anyone else can control like the load on the network. And so it felt like the prudent thing to do. And I think by, building support of more than 2/3 of validators, I think it probably like reflects that the majority of validators felt it was the right thing to do as well. But nevertheless, I would love us to like in the next few weeks put together a kind of like policy or agreement, like community, like sort of basically a framework for when we as a community feel like we should use governance hotfixes, when we shouldn't use them, and then maybe like we'll find there's kind of a missing link in terms of like the mechanisms that are available to us. Yeah.
Is this something that you envision maybe within, because we have currently like the governance working group where we're trying to define how to improve governance overall. Would that be something that you feel we should add as part of that working group and scope out?
Yeah, that would be potentially very valuable. I think we'd want to make sure that there are enough representatives of the security community and the validator community in that discussion.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall if there's anyone from the validator side who attended the past 2 working group calls. If not, maybe it can be one, like maybe we can have a, like I hate using the word working group all the time, but maybe a specific working group just for the hotfix, and that would be a conversation where we do outreach to specific validators to, well, not specific, but any validator who's interested to be part of that conversation, and obviously anyone who's interested from the community to join that kind of discussion. Mike, you had a
yeah, I've been on those calls too. Happy to participate in this conversation and provide feedback on our experiences just from running validators and going through the hotfix. I personally thought it was the right move. I was supportive of it, and it was kind of one of the best problems you can have, right? Is this increased network usage and trying to accommodate it as best we can. So I plan on continuing to attend these calls and the governance ones. So whenever this starts to percolate up into those forums and be available for broader discussion, and also the forum post, we'd be happy to weigh in and help drive towards some good conclusions here and some good best practices.
Awesome. So it seemed there's an action item here, which is create a specific working group, not for Governance 2.0, but at the very least focus on the hotfix side, just because there's a security concern here, how to do it in the future and stuff like that. So I'll work on that. I'll find time for maybe in the next 2 weeks. We can have a call just specifically for that, and we'll email the right folks, but it'll be open for anyone to join as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it would be really interesting as well to think about like how we make when we, not just the parameters for like when we choose to use one of these hotfixes, but also like the process for making it work. Like maybe the group will say we need to retain an auditor. We kind of like C Labs has like relationships with a bunch of auditors. We probably need faster, better communication mechanisms between validators. We probably need like to know who the auditor is in advance, so that we know where to expect emails from, and we can like trust them. There's probably a bunch of other considerations that we should dig down into, as well as like tickets that came up, for example, like validators with release gold contracts not being able to like easily like vote on the hotfix.
Awesome. Yeah, totally. We'll capture all that within the governance. We'll call it the hotfix working group, and I'm going to stop sharing given we're nearly at time. But yeah, so there's one action item here for me, which is create the hotfix governance working group call maybe in the next few weeks, and I think we had the biggest responses mostly to Grandamento proposal by Albert. And I encourage everyone who's chatting right now, please just copy paste your comments. They're valuable. Please just post them on the forum post. They're gonna get lost here. So yeah, and with that, I'm gonna stop recording. Well, before I stop recording, I'm gonna say thank you everyone for attending this Celo governance call. It's been a very insightful discussion, and we'll see you next time.
And I think